The funeral flowers for my husband were still fresh on his casket when my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "Today is your sister's birthday. We can't come." I stood in the church lobby, holding my breath, waiting for her to tell me it was a sick joke. But it wasn't. While I was burying the love of my life, my own family was clinking champagne glasses and singing "Happy Birthday" to my golden child sister. Everyone thought I'd completely lost it when I walked out of my husband's wake and straight to my mother's house. They thought grief had made me crazy. But what they didn't know is that I wasn't there to cry or beg for their love. I was there with a manila folder that would turn my sister's sweet 16 into the most expensive nightmare of their lives. My name is Chloe, I'm 27 years old, and 3 months ago, my world didn't just fracture, it completely shattered. The funeral flowers for my husband, Liam, were still fresh on his casket when my mother looked me dead in the eye and delivered a blow that hurt worse than the grief consuming me. Liam and I had been married for 3 short, beautiful years before a sudden car accident stole him away from me in the blink of an eye. The pain was in physical weight, a suffocating darkness that made it hard to draw a single breath. I was a 27-year-old widow, drowning in a sea of black clothes, sympathy cards, and an empty bed. The day of the funeral, I sat in the church lobby, my hands trembling as I adjusted my veil, desperately waiting for my family to arrive. I needed my mother. I needed a hug from the woman who gave me life, just to know I wasn't entirely alone in this world. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother, Eleanor. My eyes scanned the screen, hoping she was just running late. Instead, the words burned into my retina. "Today is your sister's birthday. We can't come. We're already at the venue setting up. Try to stay strong, Chloe." I stared at the glowing screen, waiting for her to text back and tell me it was a sick joke, a typo, anything. But no follow-up came. While I was preparing to bury the love of my life, my own mother and sister were inflating balloons and icing a cake. The absolute coldness of it paralyzed me. They weren't just skipping a minor event. They were abandoning me on the darkest day of my existence for a party. To understand how a mother could abandon her daughter on the day of her husband's funeral, you have to understand the dynamic that defined our family for as long as I can remember. Growing up, I was the invisible daughter, while my younger sister, Maya, was the undisputed golden child. Maya was the center of my mother's universe. Every milestone she reached was celebrated like a national holiday, while my achievements were treated as mere afterthoughts. If Maya's skin scraped her knee, the world stopped. When I graduated college with honors, my mother barely managed a text message saying, "Good job." For 27 years, Eleanor demanded that I sacrifice everything to keep Maya happy. I was expected to give up my clothes, my hobbies, and even my savings if Maya threw a tantrum for them. I spent my entire youth starved for affection, constantly performing, hoping that one day my mother would look at me with the same pride she reserved for my sister. But that day never came. Instead, the universe gave me Liam. When Liam entered my life, he changed everything. He was the first person who truly saw me. He didn't evaluate me based on what I could give or how much I could sacrifice. He loved me simply for who I was. For the 3 years we were married, Liam built up the pieces of my self-worth that my family had spent decades tearing down. He became my real family, my safe harbor from the constant rejection of my mother's household. He knew exactly how toxic they were, and he spent every day making sure I knew I was cherished. Losing him didn't just mean losing a husband. It meant losing the only person in the world who put me first. And as I sat alone in that church, the brutal reality sank in. With Liam gone, I was right back to being the invisible daughter, discarded the moment my grief threatened to overshadow Maya's spotlight. The contrast between my reality and theirs was nothing short of dystopian. Inside the church, the air was heavy with the scent of lilies, the quiet weeping of Liam's friends, and the solemn, crushing weight of a life cut far too short. I sat in the front pew, staring at the polished wood of his casket, feeling completely untethered from the world. Every eye in the room was on me, filled with a mixture of pity and confusion. Liam's parents held my hands, their tears matching my own, but they kept glancing toward the back doors of the chapel. They were looking for my family. They were waiting for the people who were supposed to support me to walk through those doors. But they never showed up. During the service, my phone vibrated silently in my lap. I shouldn't have looked, but a desperate, foolish part of me hoped it was my mother saying she'd changed her mind. It wasn't. It was a social media notification. My sister had just posted a live update. Unable to stop myself, I opened the app. There, under the bright, flashing lights of an upscale downtown venue, was my family. Maya was wearing a sparkling pink designer dress, a massive smile plastered across her face as she stood next to a towering, multi-tiered birthday cake. My mother stood right beside her, Ray's clinking a glass of champagne, her face glowing with pure joy and pride. The caption read, "The best day ever with the best family. #Sweet16, #blessed." Extended family members, aunts, uncles, cousins who had explicitly told me they couldn't make Liam's funeral due to prior engagements were tagged in the photos, dancing, laughing, and living it up. While I was burying my soulmate, they were singing "Happy Birthday." When the funeral concluded, I didn't go to the reception. I couldn't bear the pitiful looks or the heavy, suffocating silence of an empty house. Instead, I locked myself inside Liam's home office, a room that still carried the faint scent of his cologne and the comforting presence of his organized chaos. I collapsed into his leather chair, clutching one of his old flannel shirts to my chest, letting the tears fall freely. I felt completely defeated, abandoned by my own blood, and utterly broke in spirit. To pass the agonizing hours, my hands aimlessly drifted over his desk. Liam had been a brilliant forensic accountant, a man who lived by logic, numbers, and absolute transparency. As I opened his bottom drawer, looking for an old notebook or a piece of his handwriting to hold onto, my fingers brushed against a thick, unlabeled manila folder hidden beneath a stack of tax documents. Curious, I opened it. What I found inside instantly chased away the fog of my grief, replacing it with a cold, sharp rage. The folder was filled with bank statements, loan applications, and credit reports, all bearing my name, but none of them signed by my hand. Over the past year, my mother had systematically stolen my identity. She had opened multiple high-limit credit cards, taken out personal loans, and drained a small savings account Liam and I had set up. But the final document was the ultimate betrayal. It was a massive invoice for a $40,000 venue rental and catering package for an upscale downtown event. My mother hadn't just skipped my husband's funeral to throw Maya a lavish birthday party. She had forced me to pay for it. She had saddled me with over $80,000 of hidden debt to fund her golden child's luxury lifestyle, assuming I would be too blinded by grief to ever look at the numbers. As the truth washed over me, my tears stopped. The grieving widow was gone. In her place stood a woman with a mountain of evidence, a burning sense of justice, and a clear destination. A cold, calculating clarity washed over me, completely replacing the hollow ache in my chest. I didn't scream, and I didn't break down. I methodically took every single piece of incriminating evidence, the forged loan applications, the unauthorized credit card statements, and that glaring $40,000 party invoice, and stacked them neatly into the manila folder. I grabbed my car keys, walked out of our quiet house, and drove straight toward the glittering lights of the downtown venue. When I arrived, the bass from the music was vibrating through the heavy glass doors of the ballroom. I walked into the lobby, still wearing my funeral black dress, my eyes completely bloodshot but focused. The contrast was sickening. The room was a sea of bright pink decorations, glittering fairy lights, and smiling faces. As I crossed the threshold, the laughter seemed to die down in my immediate vicinity.
People noticed me.
My aunt lowered her wine glass, her eyes widening in shock. Then my mother spotted me. Eleanor's joyful expression instantly hardened into a mask of pure annoyance. She quickly excused herself from a group of guests and marched over to me, her heels clicking aggressively against the marble floor. She grabbed my arm forcefully, trying to pull me into a shadowed corner near the restrooms to avoid a public scene. "Chloe, what on earth are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venomous irritation. "Look at you, you're a mess. You're wearing black at your sister's celebration. I told you we couldn't come to the funeral because today is Maya's special day. You are not going to ruin this for her with your depressing drama. Leave right now. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back up into her cold eyes. I'm not leaving, Mom, I said softly, my voice carrying a terrifying stillness. The party is just getting started. I pulled my arm away from her grip, stepped around her, and walked directly toward the main stage where the microphone sat. The DJ froze as I reached for it. Tap, tap. The sound echoed through the high-end speakers, instantly cutting through the music and the chatter. 200 faces turned to look at me, including Maya, who glared from her VIP booth. Good evening, everyone, I said, my voice dead calm. I apologize for the interruption, but since my family couldn't make it to my husband Liam's funeral this morning because of this very event, I thought I'd bring the family together right here. My mother rushed toward the stage, her face twisted in rage, whispering furiously for me to get down. But before she could reach me, I opened the manila folder and slammed it onto the podium. I'm here to talk about the real sponsor of this lavish evening, I announced, looking directly at my mother and sister. Because according to these legal bank records, this entire party, the designer dress, the catering, the venue, was funded entirely by identity theft. Specifically, my mother forging my signature to take out $80,000 in fraudulent loans. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My aunts and uncles murmured in disbelief. My mother went entirely pale, stopping dead in her tracks as the reality of the situation hit her. She looked around the room, realizing her perfect, wealthy facade was disintegrating in front of everyone she knew. I stepped off the stage and walked straight up to her, handing her a pen and a legally binding restructuring agreement Liam had drafted. You sign this right now, transferring every single cent of this debt back into your name, or I call the police. You have exactly 60 seconds before I report the fraud. My mother's hands shook violently as she grabbed the pen. She looked at the guests whispering around her, then down at the paperwork that exposed her crimes. Realizing she had no escape and that prison was the alternative, she pressed the pen to the paper and signed the restructuring agreement, legally transferring the entire $80,000 debt back onto herself and Maya. I took the document, tucked it safely into my folder, and walked out of the venue without looking back, leaving them to the ruins of their ruined celebration. 3 months have passed since that night. With the legal document signed, the banks fully cleared my name of the fraudulent debt. My mother and sister were forced to sell their luxury items and downsize dramatically to avoid total bankruptcy. They have tried calling, begging me to reconsider and help them, but I have blocked them completely. I cut my toxic family out of my life permanently. I recently moved to a quiet, beautiful new town, using Liam's legitimate life insurance policy to buy a cozy home filled with light. I'm finally rebuilding my life, dedicated to honoring Liam's memory by living with the strength and integrity he always saw in me. The pain of losing him will never fully disappear, but I am no longer the invisible daughter. I am free. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if your own mother skipped your spouse's funeral for a party, only for you to discover she had stolen your identity to pay for it? Would you have crashed the party and exposed her, or handled it privately? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching until the end.